Hi guys, Thames Water is in deep trouble. It recently requested an extra £500 million in funding, which was rejected by its shareholders. The company currently holds £18 billion in debts and could see itself entering government-handled administration. There has been talk of it being temporarily renationalised if it does fail to secure new funding. And it has another problem. It recently decided that it would increase water bills for consumers by 40%, which resulted in the regulator Ofwat refusing to sign off on such a hike. This all comes at a time when water companies are increasing costs on their customers while raw sewage is being pumped into English waterways. Labour's Shadow Transport Secretary here ruled out nationalisation of the utility.
There's even talk of a 40% hike in bills. Should nationalisation be on the table?
Well, look, we don't have the time or, frankly, the money to be nationalising water companies right now because it would take far too long to unpick the very complex regulatory and privatised system that we have before we saw any impact on bills or on investment in infrastructure. That is why Steve Reed, the Shadow Environment Secretary, has been setting out plans for many months and calling on the government to be much tougher on regulation. It is the Tories' regulatory system that has allowed companies like Thames Water to get into huge amounts of debt whilst not investing in the infrastructure that we need and illegally dumping sewage in our rivers and lakes. That's why we've set out plans to put proper sanctions on water bosses that do this, and indeed criminal sanctions in the worst cases, and to radically reform the regulatory system to put financial stability at its heart. We want to see water companies investing in infrastructure and putting consumers first, and we want to see the government, hopefully the next Labour government, properly cracking down on the illegal dumping of sewage in our rivers, lakes and seas.
Okay, there are a few problems with this report. First of all, if the company falls into administration and the government have to handle this administration, then this is a cost to the taxpayer. So it makes more sense for it to be nationalised. Because in a sense, the state is bailing out this failing water company. Now, when it comes to privatisation has been proved to be a disaster when it comes to utilities. These are things that are really important in society, like infrastructure, water, electricity. The privatisation of these things has resulted in many cases seeing consumers paying more for less of a service, for a worse service. Now, when it comes to the water companies, she's talking here about, well, what happens is when Labour gets into power, what it's going to do is it's going to fix all of this. And we're not going to have to renationalise because that would be too expensive and too complicated. But once again, if it falls into administration, in a sense, it's nationalised because the taxpayer is paying to keep the company running. If it's nationalised, instead, the money is not going into the pockets of the shareholders or fewer shareholders. It's being reinvested. So the government doesn't have to buy the company completely. It just needs to have a commanding share. Then it can make the decisions. It can say, look, we're going to give less of a dividend to the shareholders, or this year, no dividend, but what we're going to do is take the money that we have made and reinvest it in upgrading existing infrastructure or build new infrastructure that is needed. When Labour were last in power, unfortunately, and this is a consequence of privatisation, it was taken to the European Court. The European Commission took the UK to court over lowering environmental standards when it comes to water. So this proves it doesn't matter which government is in charge, doesn't matter which party is in charge, privatisation of water is a disaster. It's a mistake. And it makes more sense to renationalise it. Because once again, if the taxpayer is paying for a company that is failing, well, it makes sense for it to at least be paying for a company that it owns. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.